Well, basically, Simon had tried to get money for this film for him to direct at first, but it was like 10 years ago, and a lot of producers were very conservative, and they were like, this is a crazy idea, good luck, no dice. But then years later, we're in a time where it feels like some of the genre movies that are playing in the theater are a little different, a little bolder. So our producer friend, Dan Kagan, who produced Longlegs as well, came to me and Simon and said, you know, maybe we should take this script out now and see if we can get financing for it. And I was like, there's no chance we'll find money. Simon was like, there's no fucking way we'll find money. But I support Evan doing it. Yeah, there was scenes that I had ideas for that we collaborated on in terms of revising some of the scenes, and there were some things that were, you do practically because you have to figure it out when you find your location. Things change during production. You realize that you can't have somebody fly out the front windshield of a car and roll in one shot and still survive. There's just things that get revised. And then there was some details that I added to the world that felt interesting to me. And Simon was there the entire time. He shot a lot of second unit directing because there's so much stuff that you have to accomplish on a movie like this that Simon was kept busy, I was kept busy. We had multiple units, and we closely collaborated on the film. It's a challenge for everybody. I always knew it was going to be kind of an impossible thing to do, and for some people impossible to understand. But to get the opportunity to try something different was irresistible, because I've spent a lot of years working in the genre industry where the kind of work that you're doing is usually for executives that don't even like genre. And they devise these screenplays that are mostly about characters apologizing for the fact that they're in a horror film. And I don't think that those movies make any more sense than Azrael, because a person talking to like an expert on demons in a library about, a haunted wine cabinet makes just as little sense as Azrael. But at least Azrael is just like, well, have a good fucking time. You might not understand it, but we're not gonna fucking waste your energy trying to pretend that we can explain it. Just come along. So. Well, I think hell is in the human heart, as always, and hell is other people. And I think that, if you pay attention to what's going on, religion is often just an excuse for people to fuck each other over. And yes, there's a form of a biblical apocalypse that has happened before, but these people are participating in keeping an apocalyptic world going by acting out of ego, vengeance, stupidity, which is why we have all sorts of crazy shit going on in the real world today. So it kind of takes a village to keep the apocalypse going over and over and over again. It was so hard, incredibly hard. And we had a very talented special effects designer, Dan Martin, who does the Brandon Cronenberg films, Possessor, really, really good. But when you're doing monsters, practical monsters, you can have the greatest idea in a drawing. You can have a great idea in a piece of clay in a studio. But as soon as that thing wobbles in front of the camera, it's a crapshoot. So we really had to work on layering, adding detail to these guys to the very last minute, because it was never as good enough as we wanted. We had to keep on spending time on them. We had to drive ourselves crazy adding this detail. Up until the very last moment, we didn't know if they were going to work. Until the day that the first burnt woman shows up in the sacrifice scene in broad fucking daylight. It's a huge risk. So we spent every minute of prep that we could trying to make it work. It's one of the most stressful parts of doing genre. You think you have all the time in the world when you start. Everybody's looking at cool drawings, but it becomes a race to get it right before it's showtime. Which is why a lot of people do VFX. It's a lazier option, but you don't have to think about it. And a lot of practical monsters get replaced by VFX because they probably didn't figure out the design in time. Even big movies. It's a crazy theoretical thing, but when it works, it feels amazing. You know, every day outside in nature sucks. The Fitzgeraldo documentary, The Making of, with Werner Herzog, where he gives that long, beautiful monologue about nature, he's totally right. It breaks you down, it destroys your mind, it breaks your will. It was a cumulatively destructive experience for our bodies and our minds. It's a blur of blackout filmmaking that some days I don't even know what the hell happened, but we survived. You're freezing, you're staring at the monitor, the wind is blowing, you know, Samara Weaving is hanging upside down, her face is turning red, you're hoping you're getting what you need. It is a fight for survival, for everybody involved. But funnily enough, the hardest stuff in some ways to shoot was just two characters staring at each other, trying to convey some obscure emotional or narrative beat, but there's no dialogue. And you realize that the easiest things to do in terms of communication is when somebody bops the other person on the head or somebody tries to hide, but as soon as they have to communicate with just standing there, that's scary. That's challenging. They start wiggling their eyebrows around, they don't know what to do. It's not based on anything that you could pull from. So sometimes those were the most challenging scenes to shoot. It was literally just two people standing still in front of each other and trying to express something. It was interesting because other actors that we talked to said that after I described what the movie would entail, they said it could create a mental health issue of them. And they tapped out. And a lot of actresses passed on just even like meeting on the project. But Samara Weaving very immediately was like, I'm interested in talking. And I told her all the crazy things that she would experience. And she wasn't scared. And she was just like, let's get weird. She was down. Fearless. It was hard. Now, you know, Samara is a good sport. She's a hard worker. She's a great collaborator. The shoot was a real challenge for everybody involved. You know, a main character broke their foot accidentally. There was like snow that came at some point. You have, you know, prosthetics, they're like freezing in the cold. You know, people are freezing, people are losing their tempers, you know. It's a survival story.
Are there any plans? Or
You know what? I aged 10 years making that movie, so I probably have one sequel in me left before... me and Simon are much older now, but never say never. You know, the end of the world can happen a few times, as our movie does prove.